Hello there. This is Lee Thurburn, and I'm delighted to be back with you again to talk about business strategy. Today is Tuesday, March 2nd, and every Tuesday and Thursday, our conversation is on the topic of strategy. And we're going to really kind of jump into it today, but before we do so, I want to just mention one thing, and that is all of the content that I provide is available in slide deck format if you want to join our community, which is free. So to have access to all the content that I'm going to be showing you, you can go to livestreamlee.com and click on the Join My Community link that you'll find there. An account is free. And you get a complete account with Apricot Rocket, which is a CRM shopping cart, and a whole bunch of digital marketing tools. The important thing is that once you have this account, you'll be able to do a number of things related to the live broadcast, and that is be able to gain access to documents and worksheets and slide decks and that sort of thing, as well as submit questions for me to answer or address in future episodes that we have coming up. So I will mention this again at the end of the broadcast. Go to livestreamlee.com and set yourself up an account so that you can get access to the information there. I want to start off with one of my favorite quotes of all time. Actually, two of my favorite quotes of all time come from Vince Lombardi. One is that perfection is not attainable, but if you chase perfection, you can catch excellence. And I think that's a wonderful quote. Another one that he has made is practice does not make perfect. Only perfect practice makes perfect. And so in many respects, both of these are very applicable to the entrepreneurial journey. You are never, ever going to be perfect at anything that you attempt. And that includes being perfect at strategy or anything else in the world of business. But as with most things, if you practice, you do get better. However, practice and doing the wrong things only gets you bad results. So one of the goals that we have is to help you basically deal with and learn better the specifics, if you will, the science of strategy. Now, strategy is both an art and a science. And so our purpose here is to help you understand kind of how the two of them come together. So we're going to talk about the internal environment today. But before we jump into that, I want to talk a little bit again about what strategy is. And strategy is the thought process that results in a set of actions. And that thought process starts with analyzing the company. So you have to do quite a few things, but you have to have an end goal in mind. Strategy is the ideas, decisions, and actions that enable a company to succeed. Strategy is really completely built around one concept and one concept only, and that is building a competitive advantage for your company that is both significant and sustainable. And a competitive advantage is best defined as some aspect of how you operate your business that accomplishes two things. First, that it's difficult or impossible for your competitors to emulate or copy or come up with a competitive response to. And the second thing is it must attract customers. It doesn't do you any good to have a truly unique, insurmountably difficult to copy process if it doesn't attract customers. So to have a competitive advantage, you need to make sure that you have accomplished both of these things. Strategy is about building and maintaining a significant, sustainable competitive advantage. It involves the step of analyzing your current situation and evaluating where you're at, making decisions and formulating plans for how you want to move forward to your end goal, implementing the steps or taking the actions that you've come up with in your decision and formulation step, and then measuring your results. Once you've gone through that cycle, then you just continually repeat the cycle, always evaluating each aspect of the strategy that you have implemented. But the implication of strategy is also that you have a goal, that you know where you want to be, where your company needs to be at some point in the future. And so before we can really jump into the conversation about the analysis, I think it's appropriate to have a little bit of a conversation about end game goals. Now, most entrepreneurs get into business for one of two or three or four. There's a relatively small number of primary motivators for why entrepreneurs start businesses. Certainly one of the big motivators is to be able to leave a legacy, and at some point in the future to be able to sell your business and get a whole bunch of money from it. In fact, the vast majority of entrepreneurs, the majority of their wealth is tied to their business. Now, entrepreneur results come in a whole spectrum. At one end of the spectrum, you have incredibly successful people like Mark Cuban and Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk. And at the other end of the spectrum, you have people that go out of business in a short time frame, 6 months or a year or two, their business completely folds. And in between those points, there's a whole spectrum of success, relative success, failure, relative failure. Most people don't get into business thinking that they just want to do mediocrity. They want to get a decent but not work too hard sort of result from their efforts. Most people that get into business have visions and dreams of having a business that will satisfy their retirement needs and support their family and basically be a wonderful business that allows them to have time to spend with family and so on. But not everybody gets into business with a clear idea of what the end game looks like. And so I think it's important for you as you build a strategy to have a clear idea of where you want your business to be in the end game. Not all businesses are designed or built or capable of being publicly traded companies. Not all businesses, and by no means all business owners, will end up being billionaires. If that is in fact your goal, then you're probably focusing on the wrong thing. Most of the people that did in fact have companies that went public or companies that were eventually able to make them a billionaire didn't start off with that actually as the goal that they had. They started off following something that they were, or pursuing something that they were passionate about, something that they found fascinating or interesting or rewarding. And so you might say that they had, if they were lucky, they felt like they had a purpose in life. Certainly they were passionate about what they were doing, but almost inevitably they had a clear vision of where they were going to be at some point in the future. And that vision becomes incredibly important in terms of being able to rally the troops and get the people that you work with and the people that you interact with, everything from investors to suppliers, attracting customers, and of course getting employees. All of these people, these stakeholders in your company, have a tendency to be very motivated and pull together with you when you have a strong vision that you communicate. And that vision should have some degree of clarity as to where you're going to be in 2, 3, maybe 5 years, possibly even a longer term vision. So having clarity of destination, clarity of vision for your enterprise, your company, is, I think, probably the very first step in the strategy formulation process. Now, we're going to actually circle back around and at a later point in time and talk more about vision and mission and how to develop those, how to communicate those, and so on. But for right now, you can just kind of think of it as having an Iditarod dog sled up in Alaska, and the concept of the vision is like having the pull line on your sled. One line goes straight out that all the dogs are tied to, so that as they run, they They pull in generally one direction to get the maximum efficiency out of their labor. Then, of course, there's a strong lead dog that the others follow. So this is really, in its essence, the concept of leadership and vision as applied to a company. It provides a direction for everybody to pull as you are building and growing the company. Now, as you're building and growing the company, there are a lot of things that you're going to want to think about. And in this conversation that we're starting today about strategy and building a competitive advantage over the coming weeks, we're going to cover in pretty good detail all of the topics that I'm showing you on this and the next slide. Today, we're going to start the conversation about the internal environment. The internal environment is not a short conversation. We'll probably spend several days talking specifically about the internal environment. Then we'll move on to the external environment, where we talk about things. The internal environment is generally the things that a company has control over, and includes both strengths and weaknesses, resources, value chain activities, and stuff like that. The external environment deals with threats and opportunities. The general environment for things like technology and competition and regulatory and legal changes, consumer preferences, shifting demands, all those kinds of things and more are in the external environment. We're going to talk about the importance of intellectual assets, and we're not talking just about intellectual property like copyrights and patents, but with the human capital that's inside of a company. We'll be talking about specific options for creating a competitive advantage, which includes business level strategy. That's the strategy that a company in a single industry would be looking at. We'll talk about competitive level strategy, and this is the concept if you're a corporation, or corporate level strategy. If you're a corporation in multiple different industries running different business units, how do you get the maximum synergy out of the business units that you have? We'll talk about governance, organizational structure, culture, leadership, ethics. I mean, you can see the list here. Each one of these topics will be several days of conversation. Today, we're going to start off talking about the internal environment, and the things that we're going to cover, which will not all be covered today. The things we're going to cover are going to be strengths and weaknesses. That's where we'll start here in a moment. And then we'll talk about value chains, what they are, value chain analysis, how to engage in that. We'll move on to a concept called the resource-based view of the firm. We'll talk about the different types of resources, strategic resources. There's a variety of concepts within the resource-based concept perspective on how to view a company. We'll talk about the concepts of value appropriation and how your staff may not be working in concert with the best wishes of the shareholders and other stakeholders in your company. We'll also talk about things like financial ratios and the balanced scorecard. So we're going to have a very detailed discussion of the internal environment of a company. But it all starts with a good, solid understanding of strengths and weaknesses. Now, this is the stepping point or the starting point for what is referred to as SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We'll cover opportunities and threats when we talk about the external environment. But we want to talk now about strengths and weaknesses. And I've already mentioned that strengths and weaknesses are things that are inside the company that the company has some degree of control over. So you might think of them as internal factors, things that exist within the confines or within the control of the company. Now, strengths and weaknesses are pertinent in the conversation about how is the company going to accomplish its mission, goals, and objectives. And so the importance of strengths and weaknesses as it relates to the accomplishments of missions, goals, and objectives is what we're talking about. And so the difference between a strength and a weakness is whether or not these internal factors are positive or negative. So positive internal factors actually help a company accomplish its mission, goals, and objectives. And negative internal factors, in some way, shape, or form, get in the way. They inhibit accomplishing the mission, goals, and objectives that the company has established. So we are going to, like I said, talk more about mission and vision and goals and objectives, but I wanted to kind of just jump right into an important topic, which is SWOT, or strengths, weakness analysis. So this is a good definition of what strengths and weaknesses are and why they are important to a company. I'm going to pause for just a second and just say, if you have a question of any sort, please feel free to put your question in the comments. I will check the comments and see if you have questions that I can respond to. Also, one of the things that if you go to livestreamlee.com that you can do is, once you've logged in to the community, there's a place for you to submit questions to me for me to answer in a future broadcast. So I would certainly love to have you do that if you have a question about any aspect of strategy and strategic thinking. All right, now I'm going to go back over to the slide decks that I've presented or prepared. So I've prepared a list of, and this is not by no means all inclusive. I've prepared a list of common strengths that companies have, and these tend to be this tends to be a pretty good list of the things that companies can look at as strengths. First and foremost, nothing is more important to the success of your company than the talent and the skill level of the employees that you have. So certainly a significant strength is your talented employees. Companies like Amazon have, and I mean, I can list a whole lot of companies with talented employees. Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing, 3M, is well known for their innovation and their continual product development, and that is a direct function of the talented employees that they have. And skills that are, I mean, you look at the skills that companies like SpaceX have, and the intellectual property, the intellectual strength of the engineers at SpaceX. These are talented employees. And these companies would not be able to do the things that they do if it wasn't for the fact that they've hired incredibly bright people. Having a positive reputation as an employer helps you to attract talented employees. Not only do they want to work for you, but they may be willing to work for you at a little bit less than they would somewhere else, where the relationships are known not to be as positive. So if you're a company with a positive reputation as a good place to work, that can help you. Certainly a strong brand image can be a major positive factor in your company's growth. If you have, a brand is fundamentally a promise that you make to your customers about what you're going to be able to do for them, what the benefit that they're going to get is when they decide to do business with you. Simply put, look at somebody like McDonald's. When you think about McDonald's, their brand promise is, we're going to be a safe, clean place for you to get predictable food in an environment that's family friendly. And it's also going to be affordable. So, when you're out traveling late at night in West Texas or somewhere in the deep South, and you need to stop with your family to get a drink or to use the restroom, and you see the Golden Arches, what you're really seeing is the promise that it's going to be safe, clean, well lit, and a good place for you to stop. Now, it may or may not be the best food, and typically it has great prices, but the promise is really one of family-friendly and safe environment. So your brand could be a similarly strong brand. Great locations are things that are within the control of the company. Now, you can actually have that kind of cut both ways. So, back in the days when they were putting interstate freeways in, companies had great locations on Main Street America, and then the freeway came through the area, and suddenly Main Street America wasn't really a great location anymore. But in most cases, you can choose a great location, pay a premium for your rent or your real estate to have a great location. Having an efficient production process allows you to not only control your margins, but increase the quality of the product or the service that you're providing to people. Strong leadership helps the troops to rally around and achieve exceptional service and performance. Strong leadership also helps the company gain access to better capital relationships, bank relationships, investors under better terms. I mean, think how easy it is for somebody like Elon Musk to be able to raise capital. His leadership and his reputation are a powerful asset for SpaceX and Tesla and the Boring Company. Easy access to suppliers. Now, here I'm talking about physical location. So if you happen to have raw materials that are typically shipped on a rail line, your location on a rail spur would allow you to get easy access to your suppliers that ship your raw materials by rail. So having easy access to suppliers, it could be on a good trucking route. There's any number of ways that you could look at that. Great vendor relationships. Here we're talking about relationships with vendors that let you gain access to unique or proprietary technologies before your competitors do. It's well known in the Italian footwear industry that a lot of the innovation that occurs is in the raw materials that the material suppliers to the footwear manufacturers come up with. They come up with innovative new materials that shoes and boots can be made out of, and they pass that innovation along to the manufacturers who gain access to it. Having good relationships with your suppliers can be something that is a strength that helps you gain a competitive advantage. Having an extensive distribution network is always a good thing. When you think about companies like Procter & Gamble or the beer brewing companies, Budweiser and Anheuser-Busch and what's the Boston Ale Company? Anyway, bottom line is, Samuel Adams, when you think about beer companies or many retailers, they need to have excellent distribution networks because they don't have products that they can sell or have not traditionally sold directly to the public. So they need to be able to truck or logistically deliver their products to warehouses that are then distributed to retail facilities so that customers can buy them. Having a distribution network that is powerful and you have good relationships with is important. High levels of automation. So if you happen to be in a manufacturing type of business and you have been able to leverage automation, you're typically going to receive a couple of benefits from that. You're going to receive lower contribution or margin costs, lower costs, which will increase your margins, as well as lower problems with the quality. You're going to have a higher quality because of the consistency of the production of automation robots and so on. This can, of course, help you to have great product quality, which is always a powerful strength. Automation, great product quality, and high gross margins have a tendency to all go together. If you have high gross margins, that also tends to mean that you have good relationships with your customers who are willing to pay you a premium, which gives you a competitive advantage over companies that are competing with you that maybe compete on price and they don't have as good of a margin as you do. And I've mentioned before the benefit of having easy access to growth capital. That can be either debt or equity. Typically, equity is the more important growth capital that you want access to. So this isn't an all-inclusive list by any means, but it's a good list of strengths. Now, as we look at weaknesses, I think you're going to find that weaknesses happen to be, in many cases, just the negative of a strength. So if you, did I click on strengths? No, weaknesses, strengths. You know what, I loaded the wrong slide, but I can do this without the correct slide. So if a strength is talented employees, a weakness would be not having enough employees that have good skills and talents. If a strength is a positive employer reputation, a weakness would be a reputation as an employer that isn't a fun or good place to work. Having a bad brand or no real positive brand image is a weakness. Having a poor location is a weakness. Having inefficient production processes, a lack of intellectual property, and leadership that's not vision-based and strong, that's not charismatic. These are weaknesses. The not having easy access to suppliers, not having good vendor relationships, not having a distribution network that is well established, these are weaknesses. So weaknesses often have the tendency or the characteristic of being the reverse of a strength. That's an interesting sort of paradigm on strengths and weaknesses, is that what can be a strength for one company can be a weakness for another company because they lack that thing. Now, typically, no company has strength in every single area that you could look at. And there are other things that you could look at. You could look at your human resources department and not have enough automation or enough efficiency in your human resources, or your accounting or your IT. I mean, there's a lot of other things that we could look at. But what the nice thing about looking at the strengths and weaknesses that your company has or doesn't have is it helps you to hone in on those areas where you can invest more time and money, more effort in strengthening or buttressing up the weaknesses that you have. And it all starts with making a good, candid, honest evaluation of where your company stands. And so this is a pretty good list to use as a starting point of strengths and weaknesses. The actual weaknesses list will be available to you in the membership area when you get a chance to log in and have access to it. Now, I wanted to also show you a grid that is useful for helping you to evaluate strengths and weaknesses. Now, I've set this up in a fashion we're going to actually add as we get to opportunities and threats. We're going to add those, and there's a couple of interesting ways that you can use this layout as a tool for helping you to identify opportunities that exist for your company. But first, let's just focus on the traditional 4-quadrant grid for a SWOT analysis. What I've done is I've put the columns as positive and negative, and then the rows as internal or external. So you could use this organizational structure to help you build a visually quick and easy model for you to look at to organize your list of strengths and weaknesses. Now, what I typically recommend is that you use the grid to put 2 or 3 or 4 words down to identify a strength or a weakness, like strong brand reputation, high product quality, and so on. So that would be a sort of a bullet pointed short list of what the strength or the weakness is. And then down below, as you're preparing your analysis of your company, go ahead and put a more elaborative sentence or two for each one of these to flesh out exactly how these things play out in your company and in your industry. We'll actually return to this model later when we get into opportunities and threats in another conversation. But we've just about used up our time today talking about strengths and weaknesses. I want to come back to the slide that invites you to join the community. Please go to livestreamly.com, click on the Join My Community link on that page, create an account. That is free. You will actually get a bunch of digital marketing tools that you can use to help you grow your business. It is in many respects a lot like LinkedIn and Facebook. I think of Apricot Rocket as fitting that space between LinkedIn and Facebook. So this is a tool that not only can help you manage your customer relationships, but it also can help you meet new customers and other businesses, whether you're in the B2B space or in the B2C space. So regardless of what kind of business you have, there are things that you can get benefit out of by joining the community and creating an account. I will be back tomorrow at 3 o'clock. Tomorrow, we will be talking about startups and accelerating the growth of your company. So please join me tomorrow at 3 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you then. Bye.